Welcome. I'm Todd Lefkoe, Chair of East-West Connections. I would like to thank our viewers and the others who have made this program possible. These include Eddie Aronoff with Stage Russia in Moscow, who has dedicated his life to the promotion of Russian culture in a nonpartisan manner. I also wish to thank our people from our organization, Catherine Galligan and Sophia Shamael, who basically provided the technical and support system without whom this program would not be existing tonight. The co-sponsors for tonight's program are the Museum of Russian Art, Global Minnesota, Macalester College Russian Department, Zerkalo, the Russian Press, and the Minnesota Committee on Foreign Relations. My major function tonight is to introduce our wonderful central person of this program, Marc Robinson, Dr. Marc Robinson, an emeritus professor of Russian from St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. His teaching interests were Russian literature, Soviet and post-Soviet film, and contemporary Russian theatrical performance. Marc will introduce the other outstanding panelists, which we are honored to have as participants. If you have questions, please send them to me through the chat, and if there's time at the end, then we will seek to address them. So at this point, Marc, take it away. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I am very pleased to be here tonight, and we have a panel of wonderful people here for you to listen to talk about this wonderful production, an amazing production. And so I will, first of all, pass this off to Julia Chadaga, who is an associate professor of Russian studies at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. Her research and teaching interests include Russian literature, material and visual culture, and the relationship between art and crime in Russian cultural history. She teaches courses on Russian language, Russian literature, Russian history through film and translation. Her courses frequently include projects that connect students with the Russian-speaking communities of the Twin Cities. And so without further ado, Julia will speak to us on Gogol and the place of this work in history.
All right, thank you so much, Marc, and thanks everyone for being here. Thank you to East-West Connections for the opportunity to take part in this conversation. I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes or so, and I want to say that I'm going to refer to the play that we've watched as Butusov's production, but of course, it's staged by Butusov, but then we're going to also find out how the adaptation by Mikhail Durnenkov is, which part is his adaptation, which part is the staging. It'll be really fascinating to hear about that. So Butusov's production is part of the continuing artistic life of Gogol's government inspector. And in my remarks, I'll address the context for Gogol's play and how it speaks to the present day. All right, and the first slide is just an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. So could we have slide 2, please? All right, so Gogol has had a profound influence on Russian and world literature and artists in other media, including the folk punk band Gogol Bordello. A little bit of bio: Nikolay Vasilievich Gogol was born in 1809 in Ukraine, made his way to Russia's capital, St. Petersburg, at age 19, with dreams of becoming a writer. His first book, a long poem titled Hans Kuchelgarten, was such a resounding failure that he personally bought up all the copies and burned them. When Gogol switched to prose writing, he became wildly successful, first with his folkloric tales set in Ukrainian countryside, then with stories set in St. Petersburg, and his play, The Government Inspector, in Russian, Revizor. All right, slide 3, please. Thanks. So a brief summary of the original Revizor. The mayor of a provincial town reads a letter to a group of corrupt officials that tells of the imminent arrival of a government inspector. Two landowners, Dobchinsky and Bobchinsky, meet a flighty young man named Khristakov, whom they mistake for the dreaded inspector. They convince the officials of this too. The officials wine and dine Khristakov, later take turns bribing him. Khristakov flirts with the wife of the mayor, proposes marriage to the daughter. He writes a letter to his journalist friend about his adventures, and then he leaves town. At a gathering, the mayor is rejoicing when the postmaster arrives to read Khristakov's letter, revealing Khristakov's true identity. Suddenly, a policeman appears and announces the arrival of the real inspector. Everyone cries out and freezes mid-gesture into a mute scene that lasts for a minute and a half. Okay, slide 4, please. This is a staging of the government inspector at my very own McAllister College, and one of the students was my Russian student. So this is just wanted to share that with you. One of the letter reading scenes. All right, let's go to slide 5. So a little bit about Russia in Gogol's time. Russia under Nicholas I is an autocracy, effectively a police state. And though that context helps to understand the mortal fear that grips everyone on stage in Gogol's play when the policeman appears to announce the arrival of the real inspector. So Nicholas I came to power in 1825. In that year, a group of officers and poets, later known as the Decembrists, staged an uprising that Nicholas brutally suppressed. The decades that followed were years of heavy surveillance. All the letter reading in Gogol's play is a nod to the fact that the government officials opened private letters as a matter of policy. Individuals showing any sign of dissent were arrested. Writers, Gogol among them, struggled with censorship demanded by both church and state. With literature the sole forum for discussing social problems, readers began to see writers as moral authorities whose works serve as guides to life. So now a few words about Gogolian devices and thematic elements that also have to do with this kind of idea of moral teaching. So Russian literature has a tendency toward castigating, edifying satire that exposes social ills. Critics call it laughter with a lash. Khlistakov's name comes from the verb khlistat, to lash someone. So it points to the punishing nature of the laughter that Gogol hoped to elicit. All right, let's go to slide 6. Okay, so moments like the mute scene occur throughout Gogol's writing, displaying what Yury calls Gogol's poetics of petrification. In the case of the government inspector, the collective petrification represents a moment of reckoning, a judgment day. So it'll be interesting to talk about how the mute scene is handled in the production we saw. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. All right, slide 7. So Gogol's works are preoccupied with sensual pleasures, including food and clothing, good and evil, surveillance, corruption, fear and trembling before authority. The government inspector furnishes many examples, such as the landowners Bobchinsky and Dobchinsky giving bribes to the man they take to be the inspector, even though they're not government officials, and so they should have nothing to fear. And next I'll talk about Gogol in Russia today. So I included a little ad for the Russian TV series Gogol that my students actually told me about, that used to be available on Amazon Prime, and I'm looking forward to, well, actually, I don't know if I can check it out at this point, but I recommend it if you can. All right, let's go to slide 8. So 2 monuments to Gogol in Moscow show 2 conflicting ways that his legacy has been represented. Mystical, gloomy Gogol by Andreev, 1909, and then versus reform-minded, optimistic Gogol, gazing into the future. That's the monument by Tomsky in 1952. Next slide, please, slide number 9. All right, so both Russia and Ukraine strive to claim Gogol for themselves. And this is an example of Gogol Fest, founded in 2007, where Gogol is he is the namesake of the festival that seeks to showcase the new European face of Ukraine and its people. Now let's go to the next slide. And here, this is actually inside the Moscow metro, in sort of an image of Ukrainian kind of folk culture that I wanted to juxtapose with these two contrasting statements. So on the bicentennial of Gogol's birth, Vladimir Putin declared that Gogol was, quote, an outstanding Russian writer whose work inseparably ties 2 brother nations, Russia and Ukraine, end quote. Viktor Yushchenko, the president of Ukraine at the time, responded that Gogol's works, quote, could only be written by a true patriot whose heart and soul wholly belonged to Ukraine. All right, next slide. Okay. So a quote from Gogol's government inspector, echoed in Butusov's production that still has currency in Russia, is a line spoken by an official. Quote, I tell everyone plainly that I take bribes. But what kind of bribes? Why, greyhound puppies. End quote. The popularity of this line serves to acknowledge, mock, and in some way normalize the corruption that remains pervasive. The emphasis on corruption in Gogol's play has a particular relevance in Russia today. So if we recall Team Navalny's focus on exposing the grotesque corruption of the Putin regime, In 2017, activists protested large-scale corruption, and we see an image of them here, and this was an issue that resonated with Russian youth. The images of ducks on the signs that they're holding allude to the house for waterfowl on one of Medvedev's luxury properties. And it's kind of actually, I think, a very Gogolian form of protest. All right, and so I will end with a few thoughts about how Butusov's production builds on Gogol's foundation. Next slide, please. All right, so one is, and this is my interpretation, I'm really eager to hear from Marc and Misha also about this. So I noticed a huge animal motif, animal imagery more broadly as well. And so in Gogol's play, the mayor dreams of two gigantic rats and interprets it as an premonition of the government inspector's visit. Butusov's production keeps the line about the rats. We also get a story about the gigantic moose in the road, a reference to whales, and the enormous dead crow that the actors drag onto the stage. A major hallmark of Gogol's style is the deliberate confusion of categories, including people and animals. In Gogol's play, the mayor cries out that he doesn't see any human faces, only pig snouts. This line is preserved in Butusov's production, in which Masha's character sports long talon-like nails, and other actors wear beak-like paper noses and move in a bird-like way. These are visceral ways to depict degradation. The production's animal imagery also testifies to how people victimize those who cannot defend themselves. The comical puppy reference in Gogol gets transfigured into something heartrending as Osip recalls the episode where his classmates killed a puppy with icy snowballs. He finally admits that he was involved, but justifies it by saying everyone was doing the same. The unbearable image of the children killing the puppy encapsulates the conformism, complicity, and cruelty that the production seeks to expose. All right, and Gogol loved to make lists, a device that allows for boundary blurring and creates a feeling of teeming multitudes, an abundance veering into the excess. On this slide is a passage from Gogol's story, The Nose. I won't have time to read the whole passage. You should go read the story. It's very good. But basically, it's a list of items being advertised in the newspaper that mixes together persons and things and animals all together, confusing the categories between them. So next slide, please. All right. So list making in Butusov's production reappears when a character recites the names of people executed during Stalin's terror, driving Khrestakov into a state of shock and grief. The earlier lists of foods and dances, I meant to say, sorry, in Butusov's production, the characters recite lists of food, drinks, games, and dances in which they indulge, right? So, and then later we get the list making, the list of people executed during Stalin's terror, driving Khrestakov into shock and grief. So these earlier lists of food and dances now appear as hedonistic distractions from the horror of history that is not even past. So for me, this scene echoes the work of the human rights organization Memorial that sought to commemorate the victims of repressions past and present, saying their names in defiance of historical amnesia. Subjected to official harassment starting in 2014, Memorial was shut down in 2021. And this was about a year before Butusov's play premiered. So in Butusov's version of the final mute scene, the proliferation of people evokes the teeming Gogolian text I mentioned earlier. As more and more people appear, one after the other, we recall the recitation of those who were executed, with each name, age, and profession spoken in a turn. Great tension builds and breaks when everyone on stage starts dancing like marionettes, and it appears that they're all in a vehicle driven by Anton Antonovich, hurtling to parts unknown. Gogol's mute scene morphs into the finale of Dead Souls with its famous image of Russia as the reckless troika flying headlong into an unknown future. And so, next slide. To wrap up, I want to take you back to the Moscow metro. And we see here a silhouette of the 1952 optimistic monument to Gogol with Orthodox cathedral domes layered over it. And a closer look reveals a quotation from Dead Souls, appropriate to the setting where everyone is traveling somewhere. Next slide, please. All right, and so it says, «Русь, куда ж несешься ты? Дай ответ», не дает ответа. So from the finale of Dead Souls, Russia, or Rus, where are you flying to? Give me an answer. Russia gives no answer. So I would just say about that, good literature asks good questions. And final slide, if there's time today, I would love, I invite my two fellow panelists to reflect on these questions that I had about the play, the current production. One, there seemed like a parallel between this abusive caregiver motif. We see examples of that in the play. And then there's a discussion of the state and its subjects and the relationship between them. And to me, it seems like some kind of a parallel is being formed here. I was struck by Anton Antonovich, his speech about his guilt. He talks about leaders drinking the blood of their subjects in order to help them. So again, it's this kind of abuse that's supposed to be a form of care. And I was thinking about the context of traditionally paternalistic dynamic between state and subjects throughout Russian history. And then the other questions I had was these quite politically sharp contemporary allusions in the adaptation, and wanted to hear more about those. And I think talking about this idea of risk and maybe the idea of risk of including them in the play. And so I'd love to hear more about those, but I will wrap it up here. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was excellent. Many of the same questions I have. And we're going to move now from Julia's explanation of an introduction to Gogol and Gogol's place within Russian and Ukrainian society to hear from the actual person who wrote the adaptation for this production. So this is Mikhail Durnikov from Russia, originally from Tolyatti, and then moved to Moscow. Very well-known playwright and a leader in the Lubimovka movement to create and develop new Russian works. He has written so many wonderful plays, and after the start of the war, Misha and his family has left and currently lives in Finland. A lot of your questions, Julia, were ones that I have as well. When I first saw this production, I thought, oh my God, I couldn't believe that they got away with doing this. And I was sure that this show had gone the way of so many other shows and is no longer in the repertoire, but that's not true. It is still in the repertoire of the Satyricon Theater in Moscow. And because of the large cast, it's not done as often, but it is definitely still in the mix, which I find just fascinating since both Butusov and Misha have left the country. So without further ado, I will pass this over to Mikhail to discuss what it was like to adapt this play for a contemporary view. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me here. And that time, it's about 3:15 a.m. in Finland. So hello. It was very exciting moment when I was invited to this process, and director Yury Butusov and his main role actors Konstantin Raikin and Timofey Tribuntsov, who acted governor. They were struggled with this play. It's about a year before I came to this, and they had a problem which you need to understand if you understand the Russian theater itself, because this play is a comedy, as you know, and comedy very depends on verbal part, on how to joke makes, how to line written, and the Butusov, who always made a very original adaptations of classic plays and or novels, he couldn't do something new with the same words. He tried to he was thinking that the play lost its sharpness with time. So it's not like the play caused effect, not like in a Gogol time when Gogol just released it, just wrote it and presented to the audience. With years, it became like a comedy about ridiculous but sweet state governors. It's about the people who's funny, but they when we saw it, we don't feel the same feelings that the Gogol wanted to cause. And my task was to renew this text and make it sharp again, make it hotter, like maybe unbearable hot. But that feelings we all felt that time about Russia. So this production and display had a lot of our thoughts about contemporary Russia, which was on the edge of dying, before the war, and it was in the air, and the performance was about this. Where are you flying, Russia? And we tried to find this answer. And the last thing about this crash test, if you remember, the crash test to the wall. So it's in the car with the actors on the stage, which flying toward the wall with a full speed. It's like theater itself. It's like a crash test for the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And our attempt was to give this feedback to audience, our feeling that we all in this car, and we have to stop. We had to stop. Julia, thank you for your speech. There's a lot of things you really noticed in this production and the connection with the play. And I think this is one of the most important this last thing, which in a Gogol play was like a fun moment, like the pause in between the real government inspector coming. Our version wasn't about this real judgment, because we didn't believe in real judgment in Russia, and it's an atmosphere of lost belief in judgment. Actually, was like a shout of despair, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And now it goes on the stage still, but without any our surnames, so not mine nor Butusov's name on the playbill, because we are like persons non grata in Russia now. But I'm very happy that Russian audience still have possibility to watch it.
Thank you, Misha, very much. I will, first of all, just start with a little introduction to Butusov and who he is. I would have invited him, but I don't think he has English. I think he's living in France, and I did not want to have to deal with translating at the same time that we were working on this. Yury Butusov was born in 1961 in Gachina near Leningrad, St. Petersburg in 1961. And he first studied shipbuilding, actually, and worked in that for a while, and also was a keen equestrian and riding horses. To the next slide, please. So in 1996, he decided to go into study at the St. Petersburg State Theatrical Academy on the director's faculty, and his diploma work was waiting for Godot. Immediately earned him a reputation, and by the end of that year, he had been invited to direct at the prestigious Len-Soviet Theater. The people who are in this are Mikhail Trukhin, Mikhail Porechenkov, and Konstantin Khabinsky, who are all still very active in both Porechenkov and Khabinsky at Moscow Art Theater. These were people from his own class at the academy, and he continued working with them later as well. Actually staged one of his first big adaptations of Hamlet at the Moscow Art Theater with these two playing Claudius and Polonius. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, and so for Butusov's style, as you might have gathered from watching this, it's not a realistic adaptation at all. He's staged a wide variety of works, from classics to newer works and literary adaptations, in addition to devised pieces, often with students from his courses in either the St. Petersburg Theatrical Academy or at Gitas, where he ended up teaching for a little while before he left the country. His style is exceptionally theatrical, and he has a great affinity for Brechtian theater, which exposes all of the stylistics of theater. And he makes great use of that. Almost every play that he has a very innovative set, as well as he's very well known for his soundtracks that go with. He's very meticulous in choosing the music to go with these productions, and you find that it goes almost through the entire production for the 3 hours. There are sometimes that it's not there, but it's very conspicuous in its absence there. But on the Butusov boards and of Kontaktia and other places, people trade lists of the songs that he uses in all of his productions. You'll notice that his relationship toward text is often very broad, especially dealing with the classics. And he tends to consider it an element of the production, as opposed to kind of the American view of you must stick with precise adherence to a non-adaptable text. Part of that is the legalism in America that texts have to, you have to get permission if you're changing one word in a text here in this country generally. He almost always has, again, that eclectic soundtrack that runs the full gamut of a lot of different musical styles. Next slide, please. So he has worked many places, Len-Soviet Theater, where he also served as an artistic director for a time. He's had a couple really well-known productions at the Pushkin Theater of Moscow, such as Good Woman of Sichuan, which was an amazing production, as well as Drums in the Night, Moscow Art Theater, where he's staged Hamlet and a few other things. Satyricon Theater has become kind of one of the main places in Moscow where he was producing his work because of the physical nature of his directorial style. And that theater is specifically under the direction of Konstantin Raikin. It uses a very physical approach to acting and interpretation of texts. And so those meshed very well. And Stage Russia also issued a film version of Butusov's production of The Seagull from the Satyricon Theater, which is a wonderful production as well, and is again almost mind-blowing because everyone who goes to Chekhov assumes that Chekhov is going to be done realistically, and this one is definitely not realistic, and Butusov himself actually is in that production. He's done many others, and now that he's moved to France with his family, he's been staging plays throughout Europe, including Trondheim, Norway, Vilnius, Lithuania, and Riga in Latvia. Okay, I think that's that may be no, there's one more slide, and this will be the end of this one. And this is the slide for The Seagull. If you have read or seen The Seagull anywhere, I'm sure that you will not have seen it like this. And that is the same thing that can easily say about Revisor, that if you have seen any other production of the Inspector General, you will not see one that resembles this one. And yet, as Mikhail was saying, this production was built on many other productions and understandings that have come before. And so I find that exceptionally fascinating. So we can turn off the slideshow now and just so I would like to start talking a little bit about this production. One of the big things that has been noticed is that this production kind of moves the kind of locus of the text away from Chlestakov into Anton Antonovich instead. So we kind of follow the mayor more than we follow Chlestakov. And in fact, all of the characters are referred to without their family names, which is everybody. It may take a slight time to figure out who everybody is and what their role is. There are fewer kind of principal actors in this than there are in the regular play. And so there's kind of a condensation and strengthening of the themes and the characters and the issues coming through it. Some of them, are expanded even. The mayor becomes much more, I think, interesting in this production. Osip is definitely more interesting in this production. He's kind of the sidekick for Klestakov in the original production, but in this one, he's the one who introduces the tales about the moose and the puppy that was killed. It had been talked about by Mikhail was bringing up the fact that trying to figure out responsibility and guilt and everything else in this. And I found it very interesting that this production begins with a series of confessions of abuse that people had survived, or times of kind of moral crisis that they were remembering and trying to figure out where their identity occurred within that moral crisis, and did they come out on the side of good or of evil or of just responsibility, or it just happened? And I think those are really interesting and huge questions, especially for contemporary Russia. One thing I also thoroughly enjoyed about this production was the fact that it was not a period piece that was couched in the early 19th century, and all the costumes being straight from there and the themes relating to that without any, and always Russians would look at tale of this tale of Gogol's and see it as satire. But I think, as you said rightfully, Misha, that the kind of sharpness of the satire had over time dulled. And it immediately struck me as I was watching of just how surgical the satire was in this, and getting right to the heart of personal lack of belief or belief, personal responsibility, and acknowledgement of personal abuse throughout, which I think a lot of those end up being really big questions that have come through Russian literature in some way. But I think that this production really sharpens all of those and makes them very pertinent to where Russia is right now. And not just Russia, but especially Russia. If I was watching this in a Russian theater with Russians surrounding me, I can imagine that the sensation would be much different than watching it here on streaming in my own living room. And I found that very fascinating. But I also found it fascinating that it did come across as so relevant, even watching it individually, because the questions are huge moral, political, identity questions that everyone has to deal with. And so, first of all, thank you, Mikhail, for that. I think one thing that I also thoroughly enjoyed was how Butusov makes Chlestakov in the second act aware of his responsibility. He becomes exceptionally cruel when he's offered the bribe and refuses to sign the paper, and poor Pyotr Ivanovich it's just heartbreaking to see him responding in that scene, and that humanity is kind of lost on Chlestakov, it seems, at that point. And yet it moves farther, and that's when we get this recitation of the list of the victims of Stalinist terror. And even for Chlestakov, there is a point where he has to come to the reckoning, and it's as if there's no belief, and yet there is still a final judgment for everyone. And I found that very powerful. And also very powerful that Osip comes and changes his clothes out of the white garments into kind of the black funereal dress, so that he is once again like everybody else. And then this amazing scene where there are productions, and there was a very famous production in Russia where the mute scene included a mirror which would reflect out from the audience. And so the audience would see themselves. And I think that this production builds on that so beautifully. First of all, with the mirror on the huge buffet that goes across the stage, so that we can see the front and back of Klestakov and the other actors. And then, as well as when they build this final mute scene with all of the actors, plus it looks like half the people in the theater and everybody who's been in Butusov's classes or Konstantin Raikin's classes at Gittes, that they're all sitting there on stage and just stare at the audience, and there is no doubt of the fact that the audience is staring at themselves and laughing at themselves. But by this time, there's very little laughter. And and I just found it so moving. And then the crash test, as you said, is of course, it's a repetition of the first drive out to the mayor's house or the governor's house in the first scene, but it is such a completely different wild ride, as you were talking about, Julia, with regard to the Troika ride at the end of Dead Souls. And so I found the whole production to be masterfully done. And luckily, with the Satyricon actors and of course Trubuntsov, of course, who is not at Satyricon, but they're just amazingly talented and well-trained actors who draw, every single one of them draws the eye, both when they're the center of stage and when they're just sitting on the side watching everything else that's going on. So I would like both Mikhail and Julia to turn on your mics, and perhaps we can discuss a little bit other aspects of the performance. One question I have for you, Mikhail, is you said that they had started working on it for about a year before you were called in. And so how long did it take for you to reimagine all, what this work was going to become?
Wow. So let me think. I came in June to the theater, and the premiere was in January next year. And the last monologue I finished 2 days before the premiere. I just last fix, which I gave to this play.
Mm-hmm.
So I was attended every day to this process since then, since June. So it's about 3, 4, 6, 7 months. Yeah.
Plus a year before that. So that's a very long rehearsal period, especially for consideration in the United States, where it might be from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. So
that's true. That's true. And it's one of the important contexts of Russian theater. The old theaters there are state, so every person in theater has salary, so they don't care about time, but only about results. Right? Because so that's why they have this possibility. But also, it's Butusov. He was on a special road. He's a special director, and everybody knew that he would stage in the last moment, and nobody knew what is the result, and when it's finished, and they were like, just okay, we are ready ready to give you all sources, just stage it. Not so many directors in pre-war Russia who had this possibility like him.
I have a question for Mikhail. So I did a little bit of research and just learned that some of the dialogue is based on real stories, authentic
Yeah,
social media posts, or in some cases, people's actual reminiscences. And
true.
I find that really fascinating that there's such a strong documentary part actually of this play. And I was wondering if you could just speak to that a little bit, like why, because then of course you wrote the adaptation, but then it kept changing as people were contributing their stories, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was curious to hear why that was became such an important part of this production, is to get those authentic testimonies in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of our tasks was to give audience this sensation, this feeling that everything on the stage is true. They felt immediately. And the first thing I wrote for the play, I mean, I wrote a lot, but the first thing which all team the gave was the first one, the monologue of the mayor, governor, mayor, yeah, right, where he was telling about his mom. Do you remember this scene? Yeah, it was stolen by me from the social media because this monologue struck me with helpless, the feeling of helpless, the person uh, who experienced that. Waiting for the emergency, which never came, with a dying mom on the hands. You know, that feeling we wanted on the stage, and it's, you know, somehow it connects with this thing about the moose in the forest, because the same feeling of helpless, you can't do anything, you can just watch, uh, and this story also true about the moose, because it's a Butusov story. It's his story from Latvia, when he encountered on the road in the forest this dying huge beautiful animal, and he was with his family, wife and son, and they experienced that sharp feeling of helpless, uh, and compassion to this dying beautiful creature, and of course this moose somehow it's our thoughts about Russia.
Mhm. And it's paralleled then in the
A
huge
lot of
of the
parallels.
crow or Varona, and then that raven also comes up in the text with the raven on the cathedral. And so there are
Yeah,
so many wonderful
and
touches.
also, sorry, I interrupt you. Also the raven he's like a trademark of Butusov,
Yes,
and appears and in every performances he
right.
staged in Russia.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't think Richard III, also at the Satyricon, is available on Stage Russia, but it is available on YouTube. So if you want to, you can go in there and see some of the earlier Ravens from his productions. Yeah, so as I understand it, Butusov's method of working is exceptionally collaborative for someone who has such an individualized vision, that that's almost, it seems diametrically opposed to each other. That and what would you have to say to the process of working with Yury Nikolaevich? Mikhail.
Yeah, my participation wasn't usual for his way of working, because usually he works without any playwright. He just change the matter of play or novel with actors during rehearsals. So our rehearsing process was, so I brought the variant of the scene. We read it with actors, discussed, and I got a new task for the new rehearsal, and everybody went rest, and I got to write again. So in my folder on this laptop, it's about 300 completely different variants of scenes for this play. But every moment, every scene was many times rehearsing with different variants, different ways of staging, and also because every actor was involved in this process. They were amazing, brilliant, one of the best actors in Russia.
Yes.
And Timofey Tribuntsov and Konstantin Raikin had a huge and wide number of tools, actors' tools, and how to stage it. And we change everything, every character many times, trying to find something the same time original and Gogolian, if I would say. Gogolian, I mean, bringing the Gogol spirit to the stage, about satire, about this sharpness, and feeling that we have to do something with this reality. I think it was Gogol's task and also ours.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think you succeeded very well.
Thank you.
Do you have any other additional questions, Julia?
I do. I don't know if there are any questions from the audience, or
I don't see any yet. I would like to say that Eddie Aronov, who is the guy who leads Stage Russia, wrote me that it says, in case anyone is interested, there is a commentary from Butusov describing his thoughts and inspiration of the mute scene. And it's available on YouTube, and I will put that into the chat section.
Oh, cool.
Great.
All right, I want to see that. I do have a little question for Mikhail. So well, maybe two, but one is, you were talking about the importance of creating that feeling of helplessness, or maybe having the audience members recognize that the helplessness that they feel is also being represented on stage, right? And then you mentioned compassion as well. Like those are both important. So I guess just thinking of yourself as an artist and what you feel like your task or your responsibility, if you create the feeling of helplessness in the audience, arguably they maybe won't want to act, right? But is it, how do you see it? Like, how are you trying to, I guess, I know Gogol really had a kind of messianic idea about his own work, but I'm curious. It's a rare opportunity, right, to talk to a playwright and who's in that tradition, right, of like the writers as the second government, the true moral authority. But still, you feel like you can do something with your art. Why do you, I guess, maybe, like, what do you hope to achieve, right, with that creating or echoing that feeling of helplessness, but also activating the compassion? Like, I guess, what do you hope might happen within the viewer?
Oh, uh, I'm I think I my task as an artist to give the first um, impulse to audience, and I'm not responsible how they this impulse realize. Uh, and but I think it's very valued is this feeling of common sense in the audience hall when the people feel this community, not just they separate in this darkness of theater, but also feeling of the neighbor's shoulder maybe. And many times after the war began, I got the messages from the audience who watched this performance, which started changing with the new events, with this wartime, and some lines started uh, uh, sounds differently than we wanted to them. For example, this dialogue with Osip and Khlistakov about the future, when Khlistakov said that the idea is living longer than the boss. And what and Osip answered that maybe you can't. Maybe he would live longer than you. It's okay. My son will over. But if he send your son to the war for nothing, and this place, for example, started the listener audience react differently and with new energy, and they in the same place with the same energy, with the same thought in the theater. About 1,000 of them who really feel they're helpless in this events, in the face of events, in the face of war. I think for them it's very helpful to feel that they are not alone.
All right, we do have a question from some viewers, and it's what comes after the car crash?
Uh, maybe new life began, maybe afterlife, because who is it? Is it Czech writer Gashik said that's never been like nothing. In Russia никогда не было, чтобы ничего не было. So
It has never been the case that there's been nothing.
Yeah, so life survived in unknown way,
One of the things I really, really appreciate about this production and much of Russian theater is that the important thing is the questions that you're left with and future paths to ponder and think about afterwards. And the fact that there may not be one answer to any of these things. and that the important thing is to ask these really pointed, sharp questions, which I think this production and this script does beautifully. And I see that Todd has joined us, so
You know, I wanted to mention, first of all, thank you, but you know, when I saw the film again and again, all I could think about was Shakespeare's quote from The Tempest about the past is prologue, and the idea that something that was written in 1842 as the revised version appeared as relevant today as it did in 1842. You know, questions on personal relationships, on the role of government, on the idea of power, on the idea of assumptions, on the idea of information and beliefs and assumptions remain as relevant today as they did then. You know, and I was sort of laughing when the question came in about the car crash, because quite frankly, you know, it's like somebody predicting the future. You never know what's going to happen. And maybe that's the element of the car crash, where it's the fact that you have your own imagination and the viewers become participants, where they create their own next stage. Um, First of all, I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to especially thank Marc and Julia and Misha for this, for one of the most interesting hours, you know, I've spent. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, again, the Museum of Russian Art, Global Minnesota, McAllister College Russian Department, Zerkalo, the Russian Press, and the Minnesota Committee on Foreign Relations. I'd like to thank Sophia Shamaila and Catherine Galligan for their wonderful leadership on this. I would also like to thank Eddie Aronoff once again, who without whose dedication and friendship, the program, and hopefully more like it. One of the things we discovered was there's a grouping of people that truly enjoy intellectual discussions and thought. And one of the things about Gogol forces you to think in spite of any desire to avoid. And perhaps that's the nature of what the world needs at the moment. So, first of all, last of all, I'd like to thank everybody who viewed this. And the meeting will be available for the recording will be available as soon as we get it done. It's being recorded now. So we'll have it. So we'll send it out to everyone. So if you miss parts of it or think others would be interested, we'd like you to, you know, to send that to those. So for those of you that are here, thank God, Godspeed. And thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks. And one last point. We're seeking to expand programs like this. And if you're interested as a viewer in participating in things like this, please contact me at the tlefko@msn.com, because we can use all the help. We're a volunteer organization and we can use all the help and volunteers we can get. So for that, that's my promotion for us. But thanks, Marc. Спасибо большое, Mikhail. Julia, God willing, soon. Thank you and good night. Thanks.
Good night, all.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you both so very much. This was it was a great amount of fun. Since I retired, I have been avoiding anything academic, and this was wonderful to first of all, it's an amazing script, Misha, and
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate this. And you know, this blast from the past, I like very much to see how it was really miracle in that time in Russia to make this, and it's very beautiful to remember this
yeah,
again. Yeah, thank you very much.
yeah, and I I'm looking forward to. My wife was not able to watch it before, so we're going. She loves Butusov as well, so she's anxious to see this production. So,
Yeah.
and next time you're in the States, Misha, we need to get you out to Minnesota, and накормить, напоить. So.
Oh yeah,
Definitely. Thank you.
absolutely. Come to McAllister also. We have a great theater
It's
department.
great pleasure.
We would
Great pleasure.
welcome
Thank you very
welcome
much.
you with open arms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if you
I got the book from from Salzburg Festival where I was part in last year. So this sentence on the cover and another is
excellent.
different. So
I
Oh,
like
it's
that.
like instead of the king, right? It's the
yes, exactly.
much better without the king. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Now this
good.
was I just want to this play was so interesting. I had so much more. I had to cut. It took me such a long time after I prepared my remarks. I had maybe 3 times as much, and as I could fit because it was just so stimulating and so provocative and moving, right? And I'm so glad you got to talk about that that energy at the end because
Yeah,
I
thank
was
you.
trying to
Yeah.
articulate it, and
It was very interesting, in revival in somehow. There's a lot of things to discuss there because it's really long period and very dense when we put all our thoughts in this material. So yeah, it's a good material, good stuff to discuss and to
It would be like a master
ruminate.
class just looking at this play of the set design, the lighting design, the sound design, the text,
Yeah.
the movement, plastica, and everything else. It's just so mentally and intellectually enriching. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
And it's so good to see
Thank you
you after so
for
many years.
clever, intelligent discussion. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yes. Speaking of set design, please give our best wishes to your wife, and
Thank you.
and I hope that this
She
year
wasn't set designer for this production, but
I know.
yeah.
Yeah, he always
Okay.
uses Obrezkov, so I know that, but I have seen many of hers when I was in Russia. So yes, so and then good luck
Okay,
to your
yeah.
son. What year is he in
I hope,
high school?
yeah.
What year is your son in high school? Is this his last year?
Yes, yeah. He went to IB school,
Okay.
International Baccalaureate School, so probably we have possibility to enroll to American university maybe in the future.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And I hope I will do something in America in the close future.
Good.
I made some connections, so if something happens, I would really pleasure to inform you and
Oh,
invite
yes. I'm
all my
retired, so I
activities.
can fly anywhere to see a play. So
Fantastic. The best time of the life.
exactly. I just went in March and April to go see Serebrenikov's play
Okay.
in Germany, in Hamburg. And
he works with an actor who's from Minnesota,
yes, Odin
famous
Byron.
Odin
Yeah.
Byron. He's
Odin
from
Byron. Yeah.
That's actually why we went. He's a good friend of ours. So
Oh wow.
Oh, really?
All
yeah,
world.
and my wife had never seen him actually on stage. He stayed at our house a couple times, but he was
He's
never.
absolutely amazing actor,
Yes,
and
he
we
is.
just did the work together. The opening was in February in Hamburg, Thalia Theater. We made the choreography performance Apocalypse Now.
Right, yeah. I
Not
remember
now.
reading it.
Apocalypse Tomorrow. Sorry. Apocalypse Now. It's Coppola's movies. So
Uh-huh.
it's tomorrow, based on our Russian immigrant experience. And
Oh, fantastic.
Odin's part was one of the best in that. He's a singer also, the beautiful singer.
Yeah, he's actually performing in the Dutch National Opera soon.
Wow.
And yeah, and then they open Legenda about Sergei Parajanov in 2 days.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my wife is going to Salzburg Festival.
oh,
And
excellent.
she's gonna to watch it there.
Oh, excellent. Good. Well, I don't want to keep you up anymore, Misha. I know it's.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I
This is
have to
above and
go back
beyond.
to sleep. Yeah.
Yes, this is above and beyond the Call of Duty. So, so thank you
Thank you,
very, very
Julia.
much.
Thank you,
So
Mark,
nice to
for
meet
your
you, and such a pleasure.
presence. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Let's keep in
wonderful.
touch.
Thank you, Julia. It was great. So all the best to you both.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.